So let me thank you to all of you guys who is attending our event on education, especially the application of technology, helping education be more effective, more productive, and more equal to everyone. So this is the event we've been talking today, and a panel discussion on education and e-learning, how to make education more effective and affordable. Now, I decided to do this panel discussion because for me, education is such a huge problem today. We all know that without an educated population, without an educated world, we always will be having problems. There is nothing to do. I do believe education is the fundamental of any society, civil society. People should be given the possibility to educate themselves. Now, having the technology today, it should help us to move forward, educating not only the one who can afford, but also the one who can afford. Because I do believe the problem is not, today education is not affordable for the many, but only for the few. And this is where the problem is laying, probably. This is where the problem is. Now, in doing so, I'm very happy having a great panel. I really thank you all the panelists for having the time. It's 5 o'clock in UK, 6 o'clock in Europe, and without taking into account all the other time zones. And end of the day for many. And take your time coming today with us and talking about what is a very huge topic for me. So I would like to introduce our panelists, starting from Jasmine. Jasmine, if you want to give an introduction yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Max, and thanks for this invitation. Hello, everyone. My name is Yasmin Sabri. I'm assistant professor at UCL. I work at UCL Institute for Risk and Disaster Reduction. I also chair the department's teaching and learning committee, and I'm the director of studies. So I have quite considerable experience when it comes to pedagogical training and teaching practice in higher education. But my PhD and my research is in supply chain management. So I am also on the fence between engineering and management by training and by education. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I want to move forward to the next one. Grace, please introduce yourself.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Grace Alugbodi, and I'm the founder of Bigenio. I'm also the creator of the Race to Infinity Maths game. And we specialize in helping children fall in love with mathematics, increase confidence, and reduce mathematical anxiety. Everything we do, it's all about gaming. So we create maths games, both physical and digital games. And we've been running this for 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. I want to move to the next one. Susan, please, if you can introduce yourself.
It's a pleasure to join this discussion today on the topic for future of education. I think I'm a seasoned prof in marketing, working at WMG University of Warwick, and I'm the head of digital transformation and a discipline group. Therefore, I'm very passionate about to apply a lot of this kind of technology enhanced learning and teaching, this kind of principles into higher education. And and also like Jasmine, she sits between the engineer and management, because I'm in the WMG is a management school, part of the engineering school. So I sit between the education and between management and engineering as well. Okay, it's a pleasure to join the discussion.
Thank you, Jasmine. Jalis, please, if you want to use yourself.
Thanks, Max, and thank you for the invite. Good to see everyone here this evening. My name's Giles Alexander. I am the founder of a EdTech startup called Pandita. We're working on building tools to allow educators to create really fun and engaging exercises that they can use in their teaching, primarily online, but in person as well. I'm an engineer by background, and I guess I'm also between management and engineering now that I'm a founder. Most recently, I was running technology and product for the world's largest online mental health service for children and young people. Prior to that, I've worked in AI and R&D and consultancy and delivered businesses and products all around the world. I'm looking forward today to hearing about what the academics as well as founders and investors are interested in seeing in education and technology.
Thank you so much, Alice. Saurav.
So I'm Saurav. I'm the founder of Linguaphile Skills Hub. My background actually goes a lot in industry, and very similar to what Yasmin, you mentioned about your supply chain background. I've spent a lot of time in supply chain in engineering. And very recently, over the last 3 years or so, we founded an education venture together along with my wife, and we work with children who've got learning difficulties. So we've been doing that, and we've been making some good progress globally on that. And of course, I'm delighted to be part of the panel and talk about how technology can be an enabler and things that we are learning, we're seeing, and how we can take this forward.
Thank you so much. And Seppo, please, you're the last one, but not the least.
For sure. Thank you so much, Max, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this conversation. I am Tsepo Ngwenyama. I am based out in Cape Town, South Africa, and I am part of Ingenie, an EdTech accelerator and think tank. We are known for being the first and I think only specialized EdTech specialized accelerator to come out of sort of the continent. And we exist to improve educational outcomes in sub-Saharan Africa. And we do this by supporting and empowering impactful education technology startups, so EdTech companies, and harnessing the power of innovation and promoting evidence-driven decision-making by a whole lot of different education stakeholders. My background is very interesting. So I am a social entrepreneur at heart. I got into this space initially as an entrepreneur, but then my love and passion for developing people and developing entrepreneurs from the back end sort of took over. So I currently lead Ingenie's programs and portfolio division as the program and portfolio head. And yeah, I've worked for the past 5 years in entrepreneurship development across sort of different industries and companies, and sort of most recently led the FNB Social Entrepreneurship Accelerator, as well as been sort of part of the founding team that sort of kind of like developed the Airbnb Africa Academy, which initially started as the Airbnb Africa Academy, and now it's actually the Airbnb Entrepreneurship Academy. So yeah, really excited to be here.
Thank you.
Curious, passionate about impact investing and education in Africa.
Thank you. So let's start. I mean, we are going through 5 main topics, which actually we can summarize in one. I will leave all our panelists to discuss between all of them, and I'm introducing one by one, and after we can start the discussion. So the first topic is about the future of our society is based on education, and this is unquestionable. But what is questionable is what is the future education system? It will evolve. What can be done to make it more effective, capable to create a more informed and knowledgeable world? How beneficial can technology be to improve education and make it available and affordable for everyone? What about e-learning? It can be a solution. Can gaming, and with Grace, we can talk about it, be a new way to teach the young generation and make it more attractive and interesting? How can we help and what can be done to improve the education system in emerging societies where even accessing internet is a challenge? These topics have been taken to have, as I said before, what I would like to see is seamless discussion between our panelists, where we can end up with a very great outcome. And when we finish the webinar, the panel discussion, we can go home and thinking about it. This will be what I really aim to have today. Now, Sauram, if you want to start the discussion and going through you guys talking exactly about these main topics we've been talking, I'm still I can't wait to go through. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Okay. No, thank you very much, Max, for the kind of introduction. So from the very question of the future of education, there's a lot of things that we end up thinking, but I think let me start off with something that's actually been quite been part of the news today. I don't know how many of you've actually seen that there's a company in China, NetDragon Websoft, for whom they've appointed the first CEO who's actually a humanoid. Okay.
Oh.
When I talk to parents, when I talk to some of the students, and we start thinking, what should we make our future generation go and learn, who are going to be getting them ready for the next 10 to 15 years, I've always been saying that do not be surprised if our colleagues, if our line management, and if our folks we work with are going to be part of artificial intelligence, are going to be part of humanoids. And today itself that came up. Okay, so this is now, it's not something that's going to happen in the next few years, but this is something that's happening now. So the key question then is, how do we get our children ready, and what do they need to study to be ready for that? I can tell you from our experience of what we are seeing is definitely a tremendous shift, a paradigm shift of how we've been in school and we've learned in education compared to what's happening now. And definitely enabled by technology, because that's going to be one thing that's going to be a big enabler. That's going to connect us from various nodes, from various bits of the whole world, and we are going to get to learn things. Schooling, I think, is going to be quite different. The way we've learned school, so it's been physical classroom, we've had books, we've had libraries, we've gone and studied things, there are standard ways and, academics that we've had to do. Today, knowledge is not necessarily just available in libraries and books, it's just available at your fingertips, right? The kids are born with, mobile phones and, born with available of information systems. So information is going to be out there. What we think we're going to have to teach them is, one is how to access that information in the right way. I wonder if any of the times we've ever felt that we want to search for something on a search engine, however we just don't know what exactly that wording would be. Okay, so that's something that the kids would have to go and learn. The second thing that's going to also have to happen is we are going to get results. So everything that we've done, whether in industry or whether in, say, post the school levels and stuff, we've done things, we've learned it. All that information is going to be available at your fingertips. The question is going to be, is that something that I go ahead with? So do I have the intuition, and is it intuitively going to tell me I agree with what machine's going to be telling me? Okay, so that's going to be something that's out there. And I think the third thing that, of course, what we've got to get our next generation to develop, and they're going to be struggling with that, as we're already seeing now, they're all with, handheld devices, right? So their social aspects are reducing already. So, any families we go to, we always start saying, my elder son's actually friends. So we keep telling him that you've got to be, speaking more and be able to communicate more with people. But when I see the whole generation, there is that challenge that they struggle to have that social communication, that interface. And that's something we need to find ways of how we would go and develop that. Okay, I think at this point, I'm going to take a pause and very happy to, open this and get some.
Absolutely. Susan,
Yes.
what do you think?
I think from point of view, I think we could access to the information very easily, but you have to differentiate information, knowledge, and intelligence. Therefore, I think still, even though the future of education, I think it should be needed a great integration between the academics and the practitioners and the teaching. Therefore, in WMG, we have the 3 pillars for higher education. We emphasize research, teaching, and practices. And we should enable students to learn how to, so learn these kind of skills, try to understand what is really needed in industry, and also what are the cutting edge of this kind of development in academic domain as well, and learn how to to be critical thinker, how to apply this kind of critical thinking, bring forward this kind of cutting edge thinking into practice. So that's how I think the future of the teaching and the learning will be, of course, will be more student-centered instead of teacher or tutor-centered. But in the meantime, we should train them into a lifelong learner instead of just like gaining knowledge only. But when they go to the real life, real practices, they need to know how to learn, how to access to the information, how to obtain this kind of knowledge and turn them into all these 3 levels: information, knowledge, and intelligence. So that's I think that's from my point of view. It's
I mean, I'm very pro what you're saying. I do believe we should be more practical, less theory, much more practice when we teach how to learn and how to actually even educate yourself. And you say something very important: how to search for knowledge. I do believe so. Jasmine.
Yeah. Thanks, Max. I have to agree with Susan. I mean, this is exactly the approach that we have at the moment at most universities. And I think when we talk about the education system, then we're talking about the wider context of higher education in particular, which is my field. We're talking about that one of the main stakeholders is employers. So there is also the society, there is the legislations, the government. Here in the UK, we have also the Office for Students, but mainly we focus, of course, on employers. And what employers want is someone who's skilled. So as Susan mentioned, we need to focus on training students with what we can call them lifelong skills. These are the skills that they graduate with. And unfortunately, many universities, and the situation at the moment, at least in the UK, if you look into one of the main challenges that we have, one of the main statistics from the Office for National Statistics, for example, is students, 32% only in undergraduate students think that they have value for money. They receive value for money from their higher education. So higher education, I would say, is now in a very serious situation, actually, and we have to innovate. And we spend a lot of effort, actually, in most universities, particularly the leading ones, in how to update our teaching practices. So I think the keywords that we need to focus on here are 3 keywords: value, skills, and student experience.
Thank you, Jasmine. Jalis, what do you think?
I think that idea about what Susan particularly was saying about lifelong learning is a really interesting one. And I think that implies a lot about how we're going to see education evolve over the next 10, 20 years. My opinion is that actually schooling's not going to change a whole lot. Parents mostly are really conservative, and they want their school experience for their kids to be basically exactly the same as the school experience they had. So things in schooling change really slowly. Adult education, though, is this weird kind of mix where maybe you go back to university as a mature age student and you get that weird label and all the kids look at you a bit oddly. Or maybe you can get really excited by a topic and you can go find a teacher and they can teach you something online and you can learn a language but mostly people learn as adults in a structured, formal way by getting their employer to send them on courses. And I think this is an interesting overlap as what Yasmin's saying about higher education and universities, that clash there. Historically, going back centuries, universities weren't about preparing you for the workforce, but now that's what we want them to do. Well, at least that's what employers want to do. But is that the right way of structuring this? Could we see a lot more of a blended learning approach where universities are punting classes into corporate training environments? Could we see much more hands-on, as you were saying, Max, where do we bring back new kinds of apprenticeships? I think in the adult space, there's a lot more openness for innovation like this, and you don't have that drag of the conservatism of parents who don't want to see a change. So I think the adult space, oddly enough, is a really interesting area over the next 10, 20 years for education innovation. Drawing on a lot of the things that I've heard from you already today.
Thank you, Jalis. There is one question from the attendees. We finish with the panelists, and after Yvonne will come to you. Seppo,
Sure. I think everyone else has sort of hit the nail on the head. But a perspective I'd like to bring to the table, it's a couple of things. So firstly, I think if most people are aware, I think Africa has one of the largest youth population in the world. So to put that into context, education then remains the most critical means by which human capital can be developed in Africa. And to be more specific in terms of what I mean by having the youngest population is that by 2050, 50% of Africans will be younger than 25 years old. And what this means is that the continent will be home to sort of more than 1 billion of young people who are below 25. So that is children and adolescents. And what we at Ingenie, sort of how we position our support and sort of the type of founders that we work with, is really wanting to make sure that with the right opportunities and investments into education, our young and increasing population will be a powerful source of socioeconomic development as well as progression within Africa, but not only in just Africa alone, but also around the world. And some of the points that have been mentioned around sort of like your lifelong learning in terms of sort of where education is going. I think what we are seeing, the type of innovation that is coming out, not only in the continent, but globally in terms of education innovation, is really just sort of tapping into or building with this awareness. And that like one is we would by very soon have the youngest population in the world, and that young population would be contributing or needing to be contributing towards not only sort of African economic development, but global economic development. So our perspective in terms of how we approach education and innovation is with that consciousness and that awareness of this generation need to be prepared, not only just for jobs of the future or skills of the future, but a society where sort of access to education is equitable, but also relevant access to education is equitable as well. I'll just stop there for now.
Thank you very much. Grace, if you want to add your point of view.
Yeah, I think, what everyone said is quite important. And I think everyone, brings their own little nugget to it, which is all quite important. But I think that one thing that I think stands out is the fact that COVID's happened. And with COVID happening, children have lost a lot of learning in that time. So there's a huge learning gap, much more than there was before. And so to close this learning gap, I'd say that the future of education has really got to be some sort of strategic, passing on of knowledge in this end, in a way that links what they're learning to real life. And Susan took, some of the words right out of my mouth, which I was going to talk about relating, whatever they're learning to real life. So we focus on mathematics, and with mathematics in particular, again, they've lost a lot of learning during COVID. So, I mean, the situation is kind of dire in lots of countries, really. And in America, I think I read just a couple of days ago that I think it was on CNN, that COVID has closed the gap. COVID has cost them to have learning gaps like they had, 38 years ago or whatever, something like that. Like the amount of knowledge, the amount of the gap that has been closed in the last, I think, 3 decades or something like that, has now, it's gone back to what it used to be because of 2 years of COVID. All of that has been erased. So again, it's about linking whatever it is that people are learning, whether adults, children, adolescents, it's about linking it to real life so that they can see how this affects their everyday life. And then things get to stick a lot more, which is part of why we use games when people learn, and also making education fun. I don't think that we'll go anywhere without really making education fun going forward.
We go after talking about gamifying education. And before moving to the next topic, Vida, can you allow Yvonne to talk, to make, I suppose, a question from the attendees?
Thanks for giving me this opportunity. So my name is Yvonne. I'm an EdTech founder. I've also got a background in education. I was an educator and a teacher for 10 years up to this summer, when I then went full-time on my business. And this is a subject I'm really passionate about. In fact, I canceled some meetings just so that I could attend, because I just thought I really want to know what's being talked about this subject. It's so it's close to my heart. And like Grace was saying, there is just so much that can be said on this subject. And COVID has just changed so much in schools. Up to when COVID happened, we just did not realize what was possible. And then COVID hit, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, wow, we can use this, and, you know, we can adapt to this. So the thinking just changed so much from COVID. And in some ways, we've made a lot of steps forward. But when I was a teacher, I was realizing that we were then going backwards again. We were getting more complacent, and we are talking a lot about what was wrong, and we're forgetting that there's a lot of things that actually COVID helped us to do in education. One of those things I think that came up a lot was the use of a lot more digital things, a lot more digital tools. And like, I think it was sort of who said kids are so used to, you know, use digital, and they're so much ahead of the curve in terms of us in education and teachers using digital. So what I just wanted to say was, I read an article, I think it was by the TBI, where they were talking about scrapping GCSEs and A levels, and schools thinking about different ways of assessment. And since now the world, I think 70% of the world's productivity and GDP is being driven by automation. And there's a lot of thinking that is going to, how can schools now use more automation? How can schools use more artificial intelligence? And to the point where I think in 2021, EdTech was second in investment only to finance. So there's a lot of changes that are happening because of the money that is being put into EdTech and because of finance. And it's going to be really interesting to see how we can use more skills, you know, things like collaboration and problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, rather than schools being forced to just think on examination and grades and assessment as the way in which to determine how students are performing and how to make them lifelong learners, or, you know, prepare them more for the world of work. So yeah, I just want to throw in my 2 cents there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I do agree, and I suppose all our panelists agree with what they're saying. Yes, absolutely.
So, Yvonne, I completely, you picked up something very interesting topic over there, you know, in terms of how the assessments would also need to keep up with the way we are thinking of paradigm shift in education, because, you know, technology is an enabler. Information and academics and whatever we have that's where the knowledge and information sitting in. However, we've also got the other aspect of how do we get over those, you know, those thresholds and that assessment system. And that assessment system also needs to, you know, keep up with that changing trend that's happening. And I think that's a very big one that we need to look at in the future. Otherwise, we would try and do something. However, if we keep coming back to, you know, pen and paper based examinations at particular grades, okay, then we would still not have been able to push some of these paradigm shifts that we're seeing. So very valid point is made.
I think you mentioned something really, really fundamental for the higher education. I think, like I have emphasized that actually the knowledge is different from the information. A lot of assessment, for example, even for engineering and for other subjects, they just focus on to this kind of memory, how they memorize all this. And that's a problem. I think in terms of this kind of, you talk about the problem solving and how to focus on the critical thinking and also creativity. And even I think as Jasmine talk about this kind of student experiences, all this overall, but actually we really need to address, you know, as educator, because otherwise our job will be replaced by a lot of robots or AI, this kind of, because they could teach them knowledge, this kind of information very easily. Then why do they need us, you know? That's why we have to address these more critical fundamental issues. Like I said, how to train them into lifelong learner, you know, that's then to give them more value for them to attend this kind of education and even higher education. So that's crucial. I think that's my point. Thanks.
There's a really interesting angle in there, Susan, about what role AI is going to have in future teaching. As someone who's spent quite a bit of time working in it, I'm surprisingly skeptical. I don't see much use for it, to be honest. Certainly not in the replacing of teachers, because that's not what what you're describing and what an AI is good at. It's not what a teacher does. A teacher gets to know their student, gets to know their student's goals, and sees the gaps, and then directs them and steers them to their goal, and by bringing in knowledge and practice and instruction, and using that as necessary. So there's parts where AI can take away sort of drudgery, and which is what technology's one thing that technology is really good at. They can fill that in. But the use of technology in education, I think the really interesting opportunity is something that we've seen technology in other industries do, but I do not see it in education. And that's something that's been mentioned a couple of times already, is this creativity. Technology democratizes the means of creation. Look what it's done to journalism and media. And we're not using it in that way in education at the moment. We're using it very much in how do we construct a linear path and we drive our students down it? How do we automate marking? And actually, let's look at new ways of assessment that are about what you can create, that are portfolio-based, that are evidence-based, coursework-based, rather than exam-based and grades-based, and start to use technology to enable people to create more things, create things that you couldn't create unless you were willing to spend a lot of money on cement, say if you're studying nuclear physics. There's all this, that's an interesting thing. Suddenly, actually, people can create things that you couldn't otherwise create. And that's where technology, I think, has got a really strong potential in the world of education.
Absolutely, Giles. And the way I put it is augmentation. So we need to have that human interface. The teachers and technology together is going to augment our way of learning. I mean, I can give you a lot of examples, but we'll run out of time. But we work with children who've got real severe learning difficulties. Okay, I mean, if we were to rewind time going back 10 years ago, without a lot of the technology that we use, right, they would have been left behind. However, the same set of children with very similar kind of learning difficulties, they are being able to progress. And the reason for that is definitely the technology as the enabler. However, technology by itself won't be able to do it. We need to be able to augment that with the human touch, with the human interface, because as you very rightly said, Giles, I think knowing the student, knowing their strengths, knowing their weaknesses, what they can actually do, all of those human factors come in, and technology then comes in, becomes that enabler for that learning. Right, that's going to be, the big enabler.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I found the stats I was trying to quote the other time. So it's the New York Times, and that was 2 days ago, and it says that the pandemic erased 2 decades of progress in maths and reading.
I just wanted to sort of add to, I guess, where I see the opportunity is for particularly technology in education and technology innovation in education with that stat, is that what I also agree with the sort of last 2 previous points around sort of how we view technology in education, not only as a solution, which in Africa, sort of a lot of the conversation that needs to happen is that like technology used as sort of kind of like a replacement of existing systems in terms of education sector, but rather as a tool to address some of the challenges around accessibility, around quality of education, around relevance of education. And I think to that, what we've seen the opportunity of sort of education technology or technology innovation in education is that it is able to address challenges like that. So there are tools that are being built and being designed to help bridge sort of conceptual gaps or a backlog in learning. Like I think some of the work that you do, Grace, as well, in terms of developing gamified solutions that allow kids to catch up on sort of like, let's say, 10 years of a backlog within sort of 3 months or so. I think that's sort of kind of like the massive opportunity in terms of like when we view technology not only as a sort of kind of like a replacement of human capital within education, but rather as a tool to help us address some of the core challenges that would often take us a lot of time to deal with or to catch up on. But through technology, we're able to sort of develop tools and platforms that allow kids to catch up in a short amount of space of time, but still be able to. And I think where the challenge, or rather the opportunity for growth and development, would be around how do we track that impact? How do we actually track the efficacy of some of the solutions that are coming up? How do we know for sure that like there is actual change and improvement, or there is an actual sort of kind of like gap that is being bridged when we say these tools are, or assessment tools are helping kids catch up? But yeah, I'll just stop there for now.
Jasmine, you want to say something?
Yes, thanks. I just want to throw in a couple of things in the mix, and I hope I'm not deviating from the main topic. But if you're looking at the entire education system, and I think one of the main challenges, as I see from all the ideas that have been discussed so far, is like each one has their own expectations. So I think we have some structural challenges actually in the education system, particularly when it comes to funding for schools and for universities. So many schools, I think, at least in the UK, they are underfunded. Many teachers and many lecturers and academic staff in universities, they are actually on precarious working conditions. So our expectations, and if we try to talk to one teacher who's on a 0-hour contract and tell them, oh, I'm going to bring artificial intelligence to help you in your work, like these kind of things, people need something that is very simple. We believe in technology. As a assistant professor myself, I use technology. Technology basically saved us during pandemic in our interaction with the students, but we need smart technology that help us to actually enhance student active participation. So sometimes I see very interesting ideas, but for us, technology is just a tool. It is a platform. What really matters is how can we enhance students' engagement. So how can technology enhance student engagement? This is something that I would like to see. How can technology help students from all backgrounds to actively participate in a module in their learning? How can technology help learner interaction, not just teacher-learner interaction? So I think we need to look into all of these things. And look, sometimes they say, the devil lies in the details, and I think these are the details that we really sometimes need to look into.
But the second topic, so even the third, is, do we really have the right technology? We are really using the right technology to address all the main problems we've been talking so far, making education more effective, give more practical, less theory, and also education today is not affordable at all. Many people, they can afford. I mean, I'm not even talking about Africa or emerging markets. I mean, I'm talking about even pretty much developed markets, the countries. Not everyone can study. It's very expensive. So what can we do? What can we do? What can be done and what can we do? Saurabh.
Very valid question, Max. Very valid question. I mean, the biggest challenge, for enabling, as you rightly said, to make education accessible. And when I'm talking education over here, this is the wide range of education, all the way from school level into university and beyond. Is technology is definitely the enabler. And from a funding perspective of how we go and make that happen, of course, there's got to be some elements of course, there's going to be the private funding that we need to be looking at in a big picture. And EdTech, as we know, is tremendous. It's huge, as we understand. But this also comes down to the questions of innovation that's going to be happening within society. There's going to be innovation that we're going to have to look at within what's happening in public-private partnerships. So that's something that there needs to be that appetite, to bring in the technology that's going to make it very different for getting to make it moving from the education perspective.
Thank you, Saurabh. Jaris.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there.
Sorry, I'm a very big fan of AI, and do you really believe AI is not right, is not be used in the right way?
My belief is slightly more complex. Like, there's a lot of talk of, well, we'll use AI to replace humans, and then what do we do with these people? And everyone's like, oh, we need to retrain them, reskill them. And actually, what will happen is what you're really seeing with what's called AI at the moment is tools that are good at doing analysis. And what we're replacing is a part of a human who is taking a bunch of data, assembling it in some way, looking at it, using their experience to jump to a conclusion. And we can replace that with a piece of software. But then there's what do you do with that? Once you've got to that conclusion, once you've done that analysis, that's the part that a human's going to pick up. So it's like who's the best chess player in the world at the moment? It's not been a human for 20 odd years. It's actually not even a computer anymore. The best chess player, according to ELO scores, is a human computer team. And in fact, that's where chess has really evolved. And I think that's it's just a little anecdote, but I think it's a really telling one. That's what we're looking at. That's where companies like AutoCAD are trying to go with AI and their use of it. So you're going to see what Susan and sort of were getting at the beginning of this discussion, that it's the information is going to become far more analyzed and far more synthesized. But it's still going to be up to a human to look at this and go, okay, what do we do with that? What does that mean? How do these pieces come together? What other pieces of information need to come in? So I don't see AI as being a particular threat, although it's going to be quite disruptive in certain segments. Your assortment planners in retail are going to have a rough time, unfortunately. But it's also at the same time, it's not the replacement. You're not going to see AI-based instructors. And part of that, my belief there, is because we've actually tried that a lot. A lot of the story of EdTech and the use of technology in education over the last 100 years has been various attempts to use predictive technology to say, okay, this is the thing you need to learn next. And people have tried to roll it out many, many times. There's a book which I've got somewhere around me, specifically going into this history of teaching machines and going through all of the attempts at it and how they've all failed. So knowing something about AI and ML, I don't see a difference between what we're offering now in teaching machines and what's been tried in the past. So that's why I am skeptical that it's going to, AI is not the special magic to sprinkle across education to solve exactly what you're getting at, Max, about how do we make this more accessible? How do we help people? How do we really lift people's desires and goals? And how can we use technology to enable that? I do think it's possible, though. And I think there's this line in EdTech and education research, no significant difference. I believe there's actually a book called No Significant Difference, where if you look at any individual mode of education and try to find a comparison to say which one is better, there's never a significant difference. They're all really good, and they're all about as good as each other. But what we're seeing, thanks to the pandemic, is studies looking at, well, what if we take two of them and add something? What if we add them together? And that's where we're starting to see the significant difference. So think what I think Grace was saying, that and Yvonne, the pandemic has forced technology into our teaching much more. And that's meant that we're starting to expand the modes. And so there is the potential for a significant difference. So what Saurabh's looking at with people with learning difficulties and neurodivergence and things like that, different modes work well for them. And this is what great teachers have always done in the classroom. There's not one teaching mode, but doing a whole bunch of different things and blending them together. Let's use technology to start doing that online. And then when you're using technology to start doing that online, you can do what technology does and drive the cost down by making it more available, scaling it out. So there, I think, and so it gets around that problem that valuable skills are valuable. If only a few people have them, they're going to be expensive. So how do we scale out that? And multi-mode teaching online is my pitch.
Yes, please, Susan.
Yes, I think in order to address what technology can do for the future of education, I think we need to understand how the education evolve from student-centered to tutor-centered, and then we need to look at it from the holistic perspective. And if you look at education is a system, there are so many different actors, they play different roles. Technology is one actor in the whole ecosystem. and including the student tutors and also all the support staff at different levels. You think about at the different, for example, if you take it at the whole ecosystem, they have this kind of macro level, meso level, and the micro level. You think about what are the outcomes we want to achieve from this kind of ecosystem, then all the different stakeholders, we need to align their goals, objectives, and to focus on the outcome. Then if we reach this, this alignment, so I think technology will play the key role to enable the fulfillment of the goals and to achieve these outcomes. So that's why how I look at how we can understand what technology can do, what role technologies can play in this kind of education if you perceive it as the ecosystem. That is my point.
I think if I can quickly also add on to sort of what's just been said in terms of sort of the role that technology can play in education. I'm also very, very interested in the accessibility sort of question, not only just from having an X number of people accessing sort of education through like a digital platform, but more from a sort of different, sort of a catering for different ways of learning. So for instance, I'm neurodivergent. So I have sort of adult ADHD, and I wasn't aware of it until I grew sort of older. And I think what technology has allowed me to do in terms of my ability to thrive professionally. So previously was when I was in school, I used to think that I wasn't smart enough. But sort of as I grew older, and also I guess being exposed to sort of more different models of learning in terms of how I learn and take in knowledge, what technology has allowed me to do is one has helped me build an awareness about different ways of learning in terms of not everyone sort of learns in sort of one way. So technology has an opportunity on addressing some of the structural things that was mentioned earlier in terms of how education has been formally and previously structured and designed in ways that excluded a lot of people that learned differently or consumed knowledge differently. I think that's a massive opportunity for technology. So there's sort of that big group of people who were previously, I guess, excluded from the education system based on sort of how they learned or took in knowledge or sort of develop knowledge. So there's that one opportunity for technology to sort of really create massive impact there. And then I think the second part is from an accessibility point of view as well, is sort of being able to reach the hard to reach. So technology has a great opportunity to access people in terms of numbers in places where are sort of like war sort of stricken, poverty stricken. So in places where like the conditions are extremely difficult, there's opportunity for technology and education innovation to be able to still increase access to quality education using technology in those instances as well. And I think the last thing I'd like to sort of speak to as well in terms of the opportunity of EdTech in education or technology in education is somebody mentioned that sort of government funding and investment in education is sort of on an all-time low. However, I think we can be optimistic to sort of in terms of the interest in terms of investment in EdTech. And I think Holland IQ released a report at the end of July on sort of a half-year review of funding in EdTech, and it reported that $11.4 billion had been invested in the first half of the year in education technology startups. And I think for me, that's a good signal that there are people that are committed in investing in sort of education technology and education innovation. And I think when we get like sort of Suzanne mentioned, when we get to the measuring of the outcomes and defining those outcomes and what success looks like, we will be able to also get buy-in from the government and other stakeholders within the education sector to invest more in education as a tool that helps address some of the challenges that we have from an accessibility point of view.
Thank you so much, Seppo. Someone else want to add something?
Yeah, I just would like to add that we are. Your question is, are we using technology in the right way? And I think we are already using a lot of technology in education. So, and as I mentioned, most of our assessments, for example, are already online assessments. So we extensively use technology. One of the things that we would like to see more is the interoperability between the different technological platforms and the different applications that we use, because sometimes these systems, we don't really communicate with each other. So how can we streamline these applications when it comes to the delivery and the assessment, because this is an important aspect. I think something else is, for me, is technology is an enabler for teaching innovation. This has been already discussed today. But I think what really also is very important is how can we innovate in technology, but also within an operating system. So the operating model, the business model of our universities is changing. So just a few days ago, there is a big startup. It's called the Multiverse. It's a firm actually now, and they have received the license to issue degrees, and they are mainly focusing on apprenticeship. And this is going to be an education, as you were just mentioning, Max. It is debt-free. So students are not going to pay anything. This is in the UK. Students, it's with using the apprenticeship levy that is going to be funded by the government and the employer. And basically, these are going to be more agile providers than the, let's say, the traditional higher education providers who are the universities. So I think these things are really, we're still at the beginning. We still don't know whether they are going to, how different they are going to be in terms of the outcomes. But they are much more, as I said, agile, and they work very extensively with employers. They focus on skills. They don't focus on a degree. They focus on the skills and lifelong learning. So I think this is what we need to think about: is how can we embed technology and also innovate the entire operating model and business model of our education.
Thank you, Jasmine. Nabil, from the attendees, Vida, can you allow Nabil to talk?
First of all, I would like to say shout out to Suzanne, our old colleague. I've just bumped into her on this call. So hello, Suzanne. Long time no see. So yes, this is an excellent discussion. This is the first discussion that I've had of this kind for over 3-4 years. What I would like to add is that I've been actively working in this space, and I own a small company called Electronic Science, and we work with the European Union to create educational platforms, so we've got experience in creating technology for education. And our experience has been, I mean, whatever the panel has said today is spot on. But I would like to add a few of my words from experience, and that is, firstly, I think the funding in education is very hidden. So what we do is we create onboarding systems for universities, for the higher education sector. So we support or onboarding of a few Erasmus master's courses. So our ambition was to basically enable people from all over the world to actually know that there's funding available in the first place. So I think a lot of the problem in the education sector is not that money isn't available to educate yourself, but the real issue is that nobody actually knows how to get to that money, or nobody knows how to get to free courses or funding. Even if you study the highly funded Erasmus program, even Erasmus is so difficult to know or where to apply and how to get into these courses. It's just all over the place. And so that was our first experience in terms of the education sector. And the second thing what's really happening in industry, which is not good, which Alexander actually pointed at, is that all the funding is going to, I mean, people are funding keywords. So if you go out and say, hey, you know what, I'm developing this cool platform. People are already using my platform. People from all over the world are actually applying through my platform in order to get admissions. And they would say, so what is your platform based on? Does it use artificial intelligence? I'm like, no, it doesn't use artificial intelligence. There's no need of artificial intelligence. We need to open education and the systems, the underlying systems, up to people from all over the world. And these systems are already made on paper for these people. I mean, that is why all of this funding has been put aside every year, so that people from all over the world can come and have and educate themselves. We don't need AI to help us. The systems are already there. It's just that we're just not. There's a disconnect between people who are funding in these areas, and or maybe there's a lack of understanding of what actually needs to happen. So that's point number two. Lastly, lastly, even if you go to, there's such a jargon. There's such a jargon in organizations that all these policies get lost in action, because when we actively worked with 3 or 4 supervisors of Erasmus courses, we realized that the policy says one thing, and these people have no way in order to maintain or manage a program that big. So I'm just saying out of experience that the frustrations that I personally had working with educational institutions who should know better, but they didn't. And there's a lot of work to be done. There are underlying systems that are brilliant systems have been built on paper, but there needs to be technology in order to need to use technology in order to actually make this accessible, and then join institutions together, and a lot of good things can happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabil. Thank you very much for your contribution. I don't know if anyone wants to follow up on Nabil. Please, Susan.
I just want to say that I have a first-hand experience. I am an Erasmus alumna. So my PhD was actually funded through Erasmus joint doctorates. It has been an amazing experience, I have to say. It had profound impact on my life, on my career. And we worked with the European Commission and we had an Erasmus Mundus association. So we were the alumni of Erasmus, and we were working to promote Erasmus literally all over the world. And I kind of agree. I share some of your frustrations, Nabil, because yes, Erasmus it's a huge program, and the policies sometimes, or let's say the practices, are not usually aligned with the policies. This is what our surveys sometimes showed, because we were working on course quality of all the courses of Erasmus Mundus. We were measuring student feedback and student experience of Erasmus Mundus for a few years, actually. But I'm glad you mentioned Erasmus, because Erasmus is one of the models that maybe we can actually think about for the future, which is having a platform where you don't actually join a university, but you take courses or you take modules from different universities, and then you have just one degree. So could this be one thing that we do in the future? Do we have the technology, and how about the legislations, and how about the governing bodies? Would they allow us to do this? But as someone who benefited from Erasmus, I would definitely vouch for this idea because also it helps you as a student to actually gain a lot of skills, completely different than just joining one university, I would say.
Thank you, Jasmine. Susan.
Okay, I think I just follow up what Nabil said. Actually, in terms of this kind of your frustration, I think a lot of research has been conducted in this area to understand this kind of readiness from, we talk about institutional readiness for this kind of adopting this technology, even for blended learning, for different ways of using technology. I think it's a key thing. We need to perceive it as a system and an ecosystem. All these different players from higher to the government and to the organizations, to the individuals working like tutors. So also all the staff working, all the actors working in the system need to achieve alignment, achieve the kind of alignment in terms of their goals, objectives, and then they should learn this and how to get them ready to really adopt it, to deliver it. Actually, that based on this, maybe we need to all these maybe at different levels have certain policies and train people to really get ready, because everybody needs to understand in line with each other and to get ready for this kind of a new way of the thing, yes.
And also for policymakers to understand how important this area is and how much it's lacking in terms of technology. And we don't need artificial intelligence, but we need basic technological platforms that can glue all of these different subsystems together. But it is such a subject that even government funding is very difficult because there's no glossy words. Basically, there's no AI, there's no robotics. So all of the funding goes in a direction, and it's quite frustrating from a technological development point of view, because you need funds to develop tech, and none is available.
Yeah, we talk about co-creation. The outcomes should be co-created, among these different actors. That's why work together, understand what is needed, and what the students need, what the tutors need, and what technological, all these kind of tools, all these what these different people get involved, engaged, and to fully kind of find a solution from the very holistic perspective.
Exactly.
That's the way to forward, I think, to how to solve. Nabil talk about this issue, to how to address these issues. Yeah, that's my point of view.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone. I would like to engaging Grace in the next, because she's pretty much focused on gaming. It's not the problem that sometimes education is boring. I mean, I have a 16 years old nephew. I get bored. I go to school, that's fine, but I get so bored. They don't teach me what I would like to be taught. Many things they say to me are too much obvious, and I'm feeling I'm wasting my time. This is what he told me. So I'm pretty worried. Can gaming, for example, is something that can make in somehow the difference? I don't know, making educating more exciting, more engaging. That's boring. Grace.
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I think this is something that a lot of kids experience in various capacities for different reasons. And obviously, we all know what games are about. When you play a game, you don't feel like you're learning, and you feel like you're having fun. And I think that it's such a field in which we haven't really brought a lot of it into education yet, as such. And especially for the key subjects like, math, English, reading, but in particular, I would say maths more than anything else, just because it's the subject that's deemed Note that I said deemed the hardest. I didn't say that it's the hardest, but it's what's deemed the hardest and the most, and it's a fact that is certainly the trickiest to gain confidence in, for different reasons, how it's taught. A lot of teachers teach many subjects very abstractly, but again, in particular maths, you have a lot of teachers who are struggling themselves with mathematical anxiety, teaching mathematics, especially in primary school, because a teacher teaches every subject. So even if you don't love English or literature, you teach it anyway. You teach whatever it is that they're teaching in that school. And so I think that is a problem. And somewhere where games can help is certainly, with children as young as possible, but that even though everybody enjoys games. And I think that, the answer to that question is certainly a resounding yes, but it's not just for teaching, because the question was talking about, can it be used in teaching, to make education more attractive? And I'd say it's not just for teaching, but also for practice, which is slightly different from teaching, because, after we've been taught something, we're going to need to practice it. Otherwise, we can't even learn it properly or put it in, or relate it to real life. And the other thing, wait for it, is also that games can be used in assessments. Now, that's where then the whole tech angle also comes in, because then you can actually assess children through games. So all of a sudden, you have an approach that is not just traditional classroom teaching, but also some gamification of some of those elements, which can support the classroom teaching. And where possible, also, while a child is playing a game, they can be assessed and feel that they don't feel that like they're doing any sort of learning. They don't feel like they're doing tests. They just feel like they're playing, but then they're being assessed at the same time, which is certainly what we're actually currently doing with the app that we're developing. And, the key thing is that in doing all of that, we begin to see a child in a relaxed mode, but then because they want to win the game, they have that motivation to learn that thing, even though they're not thinking that they're learning, they're not seeing it that way. But then that motivation suddenly comes. So what you were saying, about why you were worried that he was saying that, imagine if a lot of that were games, or even some of it were games. He wouldn't be he'd be looking forward to the times where he'd be learning. He wouldn't see it that way, but learning through games, at the same time. I mean, we've seen situations where maybe even young children who can't add, children in year 4, year 5, who can't even add, even with 100 square, 100 square is, 1 to 100, and it kind of shows, and some people still have difficulty with that because perhaps they have learning difficulties. But then turn that into a game or put it into a game and suddenly they're adding, and I've had all of these things, children who are maybe autistic and can't read the clock or just not getting it, and I have a friend whose son didn't get the clock at all until about maybe even he was 10 or 11, and he only got it through a game, and I got that phone call saying, oh my God, he's on the clock, and all that. Just through a game. So there are children who won't even learn properly without that whole gamifying element. So it's very key, and I certainly also, I used to have mathematical anxiety when I was younger, and I remember when I was 10 years old, during the summer, my father made maths fun and creative for me. That was a summer between primary school and secondary school, and then I went into secondary school, and at the end of the year, they called out the name of the person who won the maths prize out of about 350 students. And that was me. And you'll never believe that I don't know if shocked was the answer. I think I was dazed, because it couldn't be me. I mean, there had to be a clerical error because I wasn't a maths person. But that only happened because in that summer, when my dad made maths fun and creative for me, my life had changed and I didn't realize it. And when I started to win maths prizes, it was all because he made maths fun and creative for me. He actually didn't really teach me. He made it fun and creative. And I think without that, technology or no technology, because actually we do board games, we do digital games, and it's the same thing. Tech or not, if we can't make it fun, first of all, we're not going anywhere with this whole education thing. That's for start, especially with younger children at least. But even with adults, a lot of children still say, oh, I don't get what the teacher was saying. You know, they sit in the classroom all day and they're just staring and daydreaming and, you know, stuff like that. And sometimes it's because these children are far ahead. Maybe they've learned some of it at home and they don't even know what to do next. Therefore, they think it's boring, like you said, or some are, again, have learning difficulties and also they just can't grasp the normal standard in the middle sort of teaching way. And then if the teacher isn't fun, teaching in a fun way and stuff, it's, you know, it's a complete disaster over the year, you know. So, you know, the key thing, you know, games definitely, number one thing out of everything we're saying, we've got to make it fun for us. That games thing has to be there. It also provides a real world example in which we can then relate whatever it is we're teaching them to real life, whatever subject it is. But in particular, I'll always say mathematics.
Thank you, Grace. I think Charles wants to talk.
Yeah. I was wondering, there's a couple of things there that I thought really interesting. One is this, just
you're sitting in a classroom, looking at a screen, looking at a board.
It's going to take a lot. Like, can you still hear me? My microphone's messing up.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So it takes quite a bit of concentration. Like, it is boring to just sit at a desk and stare at or someone talks to you. You want a bit of variety, no matter your age, no matter what's going on, just something a bit different. And I think also the other thing that a game has got a goal in it. And when you're learning something particularly abstract, it's really difficult to figure out why. What's the goal? What's the point of this? You're like, right, okay, forget all that. Forget the bigger picture. Just achieve this goal in this game. Off you go. And I wonder if there's a bit of a risk there because you get my background in mental health and psychology. I know that there's this whole thing around motivations, intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, and supplanting and losing motivation because, and so I'm always just like, okay, where do games sit in this? And I would love to see educational toys, including educational toys for adults. The toy doesn't have a goal built into it. You create your own goal. And so that kind of open-ended play and variety and exploration there would be a really interesting way of taking the great things about teaching through games and teaching through fun and enjoyment and variety and allowing, and then you've got that great collaboration with your educator, because instead of it just being like, right, okay, it's 30 minutes now, go do this game, and the teacher checks out. They've instead got to say, okay, here's the toy, I'm going to call it a toy, and this is what you're trying to achieve with it. Off you go. It's why Lego was the toy of the century, right? It doesn't have a goal. It's whatever you want it to be. And I think that's, there's an interesting piece there in technology. But again, that comes back to my point I made a few times, that how do you use technology to really harness and open people's creativity, which is something I don't see happening in education. And I would love to see it. And I think toys and gaming is a potential route to that.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, you're very right. We always say to teachers when they are using games to teach, we always say they should do what we call scaffolding, because there you mentioned about, of course, the teacher, and a lot of teachers might think that, that they can just go and have fun while the kids are playing the games for an hour or for half an hour. But that's not actually it. That's actually when they have the most opportunity to get engaged with the child, much more than even when they're doing traditional teaching, because then the child is more ready to listen, they're more motivated. And again, they've got that goal, as you said, if it's a game, and they want to win. So they will do anything, 5 times 4, 9 times 9. The things they won't do normally, 12 times 12, they'll do it. Or they'll ask their neighbor what the answer is to that 12 times 12. But if you gave them normally in the class and the teacher's asking what's 12 times 12, they just stand there and I don't know. I mean, I remember when I was younger as well. This is before my dad supported me with maths. I remember when we get into class, the teacher would be standing there waiting for us. No, we'd be in class, and when he comes in, we've all got to stand up, and then he asks all of us questions, so he'll go, Grace, 8 times 3. And then if you get it right, you sit down. If you don't, you keep standing. And then the rest of us who don't know it, at the end of it, if we got ours wrong, we're still standing, and then we get caned. All of us, like ban on. I know. But just if that was a game and we were playing it through the games and they weren't like giving us problems and not knowing what 12 times 11 is, well, the people who are playing with me, there's room for collaboration, because then I've rolled a 12 times 11. I don't know where to move to. I don't know what it is. Therefore, I don't know whether I want to use that as an option or not, multiplication as an option or not. My neighbor would tell me. They will just say, oh, yeah, that's 132. Now, how many times do I need to hear That 12 times 11 is 132 for me to remember it in future. Maybe the 5th time we play games, maybe I'll hear it 5 times and then I'll know it. Just like you go somewhere with the Google Maps, you might not know all of the turn-ins, but then when you get there, well, next time you go there, even if it's just the second to the last turn-in, you'll at least remember that, oh yeah, I saw the traffic lights and I saw that building there and then I turned left. You'll start knowing it gradually, just through just having done it many times. And then if you've got that motivation to do it, it just makes it that much more easier. So it's what we call scaffolding, which is teachers have got to support those children while they're playing those games and relating those things to real life for them. And it's working very, very well for us in schools.
Thank you so much, Grace. We have so many questions in the Q&A regarding VR, AR, and blockchain. Can them enhance teaching in somehow? Susan.
Yes, I think the games are very important part of, from my experiences, I can demonstrate how important the games are for my modules in higher education. I have been delivering 2 key modules, strategic marketing, and one is global marketing strategy. Basically, we have in total 100 hours teaching time, but we spend nearly 30 hours and play the game. Play the simulation game. It's called Marketplace. And the students just love this playing the game, because actually, in our module review, this is the most enjoyable part of the whole module. It's very important. I think for me, from my perspective, actually, even the simulation game could really enable students to develop so many different skills, and problem solving, even though it's kind of simulation, all this of the real market. They are selling some 3D printed bikes, in different cities, in different continents. But actually, and also they have to work together because they play different roles in a real company, like product manager and advertising manager, sales people, all these, even chair of the company. And they enjoy doing that. I think and I think simulation has been quite widely adopted or used in higher education. So the games are very crucial part for education. I think it's very important.
What about the adoption of virtual reality, augmented reality, or blockchain? Can help?
Blockchain and AI, I'm not sure how these games are designed. Do they use this kind of technology to blockchain? I'm not sure. Maybe AI can be applied, because more focus on this kind of analytical part. Even I think I have one student who did a project on actually it's called digital twins. Digital twins. Actually, I think there might be some simulation focused on this kind of digital manufacturing, and you try to create this kind of digital twin. And actually, how you can really there are 3 different types of digital twins, like diagnostic, predictive, and another type is called prescriptive or prescribed. And there are different types of digital twins. They use different types of simulation. I think AI has been applied to create this kind of simulation. I think it's kind of game possible used in education and also used in some real companies as well.
Yeah, with augmented reality as well. At the end of the day, augmented reality, virtual reality, they're all still, well, a lot of it is around games. So at the end of the day, it's still games. Whatever it is that people have to do in games, they'll do because it's a game and it's just fun. And they'll prefer that to teaching. But just to speak about augmented reality in particular, and we're actually creating an augmented reality app. And so I can give a real life example about how that applies. And so in that game, so we have the board game we already have, and then we're creating an app such that the child will then point their digital device to the board on the game, and then it picks up the positions that their game pieces are on the physical board game. The app picks it up, and then it starts to tell them the different options that they can take. So it's teaching them a little bit about critical thinking, creative thinking, analytical thinking. It's helping them develop maths fluency, reasoning, and problem solving through augmented reality. Because augmented reality, some people might not know what that is, but it's about linking the physical world with the digital world. So that's a digital world, and then a physical board game would be the physical world. And it doesn't have to be just about board games. It could be anything else, but it's just picking, seeing something that's physical and then using a digital device to do stuff on there without actually having to touch anything, just literally just pointing your camera to it or your digital device to it. In the case of the game, for example, it'll pick up the positions that the children are in and start to teach them stuff, almost like, again, it uses some AI though, which is also trying to learn how children are thinking in that sense and what options are they choosing. And are they choosing all the options possible? Because then we know that, okay, that child is missing some sort of reasoning and problem solving skills at that stage, which we can then help them with further, or that teachers can pick up reports from the app from and parents and use to support their children. So that's where you can use sort of augmented reality. Virtual reality is where you actually feel that you're inside a world that you're actually not physically in. So it's just another form of, of bringing things to real life, basically. So if you think about, say Monopoly, and then if you wore a virtual reality set, think about then suddenly seeing yourself moving on top of the hotels or on top of those spaces. That's what virtual reality is. So again, it makes it real. So think about a child that's learning through that sort of means. They feel like they're doing, they're picking it up, they're picking the 5 and the 9 and then multiplying it together inside something, even though they're not really there. Do you see what I mean? They're not there in real life, but it's all virtual. So all of those are very, very useful. And then regarding blockchain, again, definitely can be mixed. Just very recently, I heard about a company called TinyTap, who are turning maths learning. No, sorry, not maths learning. I do have a problem. I'm always talking about maths now. Sorry, who are talking about learning, and they are teaching that they allow teachers to create courses for any kind of learning, English, maths, whatever, and they're kind of all gamified again. But then those courses then become like an NFT, where investors can then go there and invest in that course or buy that course. And that NFT is on blockchain, of course. Do you see what I mean? Because all an NFT is just some sort of proof that, yes, you own that particular, whatever it is, whether IP, whether real estate, whatever it is. So all of those things, I think they're all related. And I wanted to mention that Nancy, she said she's going to give up because she's missing the chat.
I think it's been variety for a while.
Yeah, but she did make a very good. Yeah, but she made a very good comment here. She said she developed an online course for WHO on COVID vaccination uptake, and she said that the first version did not have a game, and they had a 16% completion rate, which isn't terrible. But then they added a game in, and bam, the completion rate went up 60%. These are not children; these are adults. I mean, the course has been done by adults, I guess, and the rate went up so much. So again, gamification is the way.
Yeah, you're right. In terms of blockchain, I can think about my colleague. He is running the cybersecurity course. I think they are using something like blockchain to in cybersecurity. Some application of the blockchain in that. Yeah, cybersecurity definitely one example. Yeah, this has been applied widely in higher education. I think another colleague, he's using simulation on digital logistics. I think it's like Chris said, it's kind of augmented reality has been applied, AI, or to design this type of games. As because for in this kind of management courses or modules, a lot of these games has been developed and by using this kind of digital technology, AI, VI and blockchains. For sure, it's quite in higher education. From my own experience, I know a lot about this application of these technologies.
And it's a higher education that's developing the app for us. Actually, it is still a higher education institution, And there's another one that we're about to start working with as well, also a university. Lots of universities are doing a lot of major stuff in AR and VR, you know, especially linked to games. I mean, even universities like Harvard, Stanford, they all have this state-of-the-art labs for AR and VR. So these are big things actually in the gaming industry. So the person that asked that question is totally, you know, totally on point in that question. And Susan, you know, yeah, amazing about cybersecurity as well.
Sarah, if you want to add or Jales something, or Jasmine, before we close.
Yeah, if I could add some very quick points, some fantastic points that you've picked up over there, we've been using games for, with a lot of our children who are neurodivergent. And what we've seen is some tremendous advancements that they've had in their learning. So absolutely no doubt about that. But I think what we also need is when it goes to that school level side of things, the primary and secondary education, we also need the assessment bodies to start embracing these ways of learning. That's the one thing that also needs to happen as we look at that paradigm shift. So absolutely, there is no doubt about it, how this helps us to learn and go and do things. So that's absolutely out there. So reference materials wise, if you were to look at AR and VR, there's a lot of things out there and children get to learn with it. If you're going to look at mainstream education into that, at least in the school side of things, then, there's a bit still to go for when it comes down to the different boards who are going to accept how children are learning, how they're going to be applying that. So that's out there. From me, I think there's one last bit I'd like to mention that we started off with this whole thing. What is it that is needed for academics or education to be in the future? I think the big thing that our future generation is going to need is to learn, to unlearn, and to relearn. So that's a skill that they would have to go and do. And that's something we are all having to do. I think a lot of us sitting over here, whether in the panel or whether in the audience, we trained on something back in the university, where we went on to do something slightly maybe different in our careers, and today we are possibly doing something else, right? So there was an element of the learning, and we had to unlearn something, and then we had to relearn. And what the next the digital revolution that we are saying that's happening, Industry 4.0 and everything, is it's only making it fast. So how quickly can I learn something, and how quickly can I unlearn that to be able to go and absorb something completely different? And I think that's going to be the big challenge that we are going to face in our next generations.
Thanks, Saurabh. I'd like to add just a little bit. I think AR, augmented reality, is particularly interesting. And I'll come back to one of my first points is that at least in the next 10 to 15 years, the future of innovation and education is going to be in the adult space. Because it's not as conservative, there are a lot more payers, there's a lot more involved. It's honestly quite a lot more ethical to experiment on adults than children. That's the side of it too. So it's a lot more of an open area for interesting experimentation. I think AR can be really interesting there because it's a way of taking concepts, things that can be quite theoretical and quite abstract, and literally layering them onto the real world. So a part of the education process, the learning process, is to take a concept and make it real, contextualize it. And AR is enormous help for that. And so that, I think, if you're thinking about what's happening with education and what I'm looking at, it's this idea that how do you help adults learn more things, to change and expand, to find their own goals for learning, to pursue their goals, and to do that with a strong sense of empowerment and creativity. I'd love to see that happen in education over the next 10 to 15 years.
Thank you, Jales. Jasmine, if you want to add something.
Yeah, I think I've listened to the discussion. I think it's really interesting as we use also gaming in logistics and supply chain management. I mean, one of the most famous games for us is the beer game, and actually it teaches students on the bullwhip effect of the disconnect between the supply side and the demand side of businesses and of supply chains, which is really important. So I think the main, like at UCL, we have a framework for learning. We call it the connected learning. And sometimes we forget that we learn in different ways. So the most traditional, I would say predominant way of learning is what we call acquisition, that you have someone you have the lecturer or the teacher, and they are just one-way communication. They are just teaching you. But then there are several other ways to learn. We learn by practicing, we learn by investigating, we learn by discussion, we learn by collaboration, we also learn by producing something. And I think all of these elements kind of can be found in a game. And this is why games are very interesting. And this is why students and adults equally like games. So my advice to anyone, also from the audience, if you are interested in developing new technology, no matter what is the technology you're developing, please focus on the different types of learning, because we learn through many different types, not just through acquisition of knowledge. Thanks.
Thank you, Jasmine. So we arrived to the end. Thank you so much to everyone. It's been an absolutely beautiful session. I really enjoyed. And we have the next one will be this 3rd of November, e-mobility, for the one who wants to come. We are very happy to have as many attendees as we can. Thank you again very much. It's been a beautiful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having us.